Awesome. All right. Well, welcome to the Mr. Bill podcast. Justin, thanks a lot for taking the time to do this. I imagine you're really busy. And for those who don't know you, you've done all sorts of crazy stuff that's changed the world in a lot of ways, I feel like. First you did, or maybe not first, but you're the creator of Winamp, the creator of Reaper. You did Shoutcasts and Nutella, I believe, as well. So a bunch of really cool programming stuff, and yeah, I'm excited to chat and just dig into some of your thoughts and whatnot. So yeah,
Cool.
thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I guess let's start from like, what does your typical day look like these days, and how does that differ from maybe your Winamp days?
Um, well, I mean, it's hard to describe a typical day. I feel like my days, every day is different. I wake up and have coffee. That's usually my first step. I think getting older, I've been sort of programming things for what would it be, about 30 years at this point, and I can't sit as long in one go. So I'm very much more scattered in terms of my activities. Like I'll get up and I'll do work and type and but even like I stand at a desk sometimes. I'll sit down and I have to move around a lot. Back in the Winamp days, I would probably spend many hours at a go just sitting at a computer, that happens less now. I think it's more spread out throughout the day, and I'm more active. I out walking or running and things like that, which also gives me a lot of good time to sort of reflect on the things I'm working on and things I would like to be working on.
Yeah, smart. Yeah, I find the same. I'm like 37 now, and I used to be able to just sit here all day and write music and then go to sleep, wake up, do the exact same thing the whole next day and whatnot. But yeah, these days it causes way too many lower back problems if I do that. How did you get into programming originally?
I mean, it was something I was interested in growing up with, like an Atari 8-bit in the house, so learning BASIC on that, and then but when I was in high school and had access to some PCs that had like Turbo Pascal and Turbo C, then that's sort of where I really got more interested in it. And where I went to high school, we had a small computer lab that was a bunch of like 386SX computers with on a Novell network, and I started writing programs there. Initially for things nefarious, like writing TSRs that would you could run and that would capture keystrokes, just for to be because you could. And then later on, like writing software to run on those computers to like do things like like a little local email program, that sort of thing, which was fun. It was fun being in that environment and then having other students who would be around who could use the software having that whole thing, that whole process of writing software, getting people to use it and give you feedback, and sort of that feedback loop, which is a lot of fun.
Hmm. Yeah, I heard you say in an interview that a lot of the things that you build these days or have built in the past have come from a need of you just wanting to have a thing on the computer that does that, or there isn't a simple way to do that, or there's a
Yeah,
not a good way to do that. Is that basically what made you also get into making Reaper?
definitely. Yeah, after writing Winamp and then sort of losing it, having it left at AOL when I left AOL, I started getting into playing music and recording, and I started using Logic, and then and this was in like 2003, Logic, and then Sony Vegas or Sonic Foundry Vegas, and I used that for a while, and then found myself up against limits of things I wanted to be able to do that I couldn't easily do. And at the time, like, Sonic Foundry made Vegas, which was like a video editing application, which did audio recording really well, as sort of a virtual tape machine. But you couldn't do VSTIs, you couldn't do a whole lot of things with sequencing. And then they also made ACID, which you could do some really cool sequencing stuff and manipulation of loops and things like that. But if you wanted to just record audio, you're sort of out of luck. They sort of ended up merging them eventually, but in that time period, I was like, oh well, here's something I want to be able to do easily and well, and so I started writing software just mainly as a recording machine. And initially, it was the real emphasis was about being able to easily recording was like the big priority. So from the very beginning in Reaper, you could start something recording and then add tracks, add new recording inputs on the fly while it's recording and that sort of thing, which the software that I was using at the time, you couldn't do that. If you wanted to change the recording input on something or add a new track or all these things, you had to do it while you stopped. So if you were going and having a 8-hour jam session with your friends, it was not easy to capture in one go.
Mm. What was the original onus behind Winamp? What do you remember what the reason was as to why you're like, I need Winamp to exist?
I mean, the real thing was MP3s sort of came into being where you had a pretty reasonable amount of file size that you could download on a modem to listen to a song. And prior to Winamp, when I was in high school, one of the things I made was I had a laptop that didn't have a sound card. It just had it was really old. And I mean, back in that days, most laptops didn't have sound cards, but it had a parallel port, and you could build out of a resistor network. You could build a digital to analog converter, and it sounded pretty terrible. But so I built one of those, and then I started downloading digitized tracks from in the AU format, which is 8-bit. Non-linear, so it sounded a little bit better than normal 8-bit. But so I downloaded songs from that, and then I wrote software that would run on DOS that would play back through the parallel port these tracks. And so I was sort of interested in being able to just listen to music on the computer. And so couple years later, when I'm in college and MP3s sort of come onto the scene, obviously downloading music, this is cool. I get to get access to more music. Also, where I grew up, there was only occasionally a record store. It was a small town and a lot of retired people. So finding new music was difficult. It was usually getting copies of tapes from people. And I had a tape of the Red Hot Chili Peppers album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which I listened to, which was a dub. I listened to probably 1,000 times. Anyway, so I'd written software for music before, and then for playing back music. And then when MP3s came about, I was naturally interested in that because it was that much better, so much in quality and size. And then when I was in college, another student who I met basically was working on porting AMP to the Mac, and he made Mac AMP, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's actually doable. And I had no idea how to do MP3 decoding at that time, and so I did something similar where I ported AMP to Windows and made Winamp, and that was how I made Winamp. And I was on IRC, which is the chat program chat protocol that predates all of social networks and everything today, and sort of distributed there initially, got a lot of feedback from people who were into MP3s, and it just kind of went from there.
So yeah, for those who don't know what IRC is, it's basically the equivalent of what Discord is today, but 20 years ago. And
it doesn't. The other thing about IRC is it's more ephemeral, if that's the right word for it. You have to be there when a conversation it happens. It doesn't log. People may individually log what happens, but if you join a channel, you have a blank slate. Nothing's happened before. You might join it in the middle of a conversation between people and not have no context for for what's happening too.
Oh, right. And then when like everyone leaves that channel, the channel just gets deleted.
Right. And yeah, there's no persistent history that's hosted by the server. And it's also much more distributed and ultimately tries to be democratic. Whereas Discord, there's like people who manage own a particular channel and that sort of thing.
What was so Winamp obviously got massive, and then it eventually got bought by AOL, which for those who don't know what AOL is, it was like some old chat service, kind of like MSN Messenger or something like that. Or
Well, AOL existed at a time before the internet was in widespread use, and it was something that people would dial in on their phones to connect to, and then yes, it had chat and it had message boards and it had businesses would expose themselves to customers through AOL, and then eventually they became one of the largest internet service providers in the U.S. But it was all still using dial-up phone lines. And if you don't know what that is at this point, you'll have to look up that. But they didn't sort of update. They didn't plan for broadband in a way that made any sense. So they kind of ended up going out of existence because the world moved on from the whole dial-up internet thing that they sort of stuck with way too long.
right. So what was the growth period like for Winamp to the point where it eventually got purchased by AOL?
I mean, it's been a while. It was, I guess it was fast. I mean, I think by the time we got purchased by AOL, we probably had tens of millions of users. But we didn't grow as a company. We, had like a total of like 5 or 6 people doing things, and it was a good time. But it's funny actually. At the time, it seemed like this big thing, and it seemed like a long time. But I only really worked on it for a few years before, or 2 years before it sold, and then a few years after that, or 5 years after that, and at this point now, I've been working on Reaper for almost 20 years. So it's sort of Winamp seems like a small, it was a small code base. It was a small amount of effort, and but at the time it was big and exciting.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the ideas that get massive like that are usually very simple. Like I was chatting the other day to the guy who made Instagram, and he was like, yeah, this is just like, I like photography and I made this thing. It took me 3 weeks to make, and then all of a sudden it's like the biggest thing in the world. And then he's telling me he spent like way more time on this other like news aggregate site thing, and he spent like years of effort on that, and it didn't get anywhere near as big. It's funny how like effort does not always equal value.
Yeah, I mean, I think with things like Instagram or Winamp for that matter, neither of them was first at what they did. It was just a matter of doing something really well and doing it in a way that people really like and found appealing. And that's, I think, ultimately why they take off, is that that intangible appeal.
Yeah, it's like a time saver, or it's something that like gives you a dopamine in some way or another, or it's just very efficient in some way or another. What was it like working under AOL? Because I feel like the vibe I get from you is that you're super independent and you like to do things your way, and you're always like, starting these what seem like very not quite open source, but basically open source type projects. It was working for a big company like AOL something that you enjoyed, or was it what was that like?
It was an interesting experience. Initially, it was they gave us a lot of freedom, and gradually as time goes on, that got sort of whittled away. But it's not something I'm looking to repeat, I guess. I guess ultimately you have, always in a company like that, you have a lot of people with different interests, and you end up making all these compromises. And have you seen the show Mythic Quest?
I have not.
It's an Apple TV show, and it's about people in a game studio making games, and But there's one episode in particular of that show which completely captures what it's like to have someone who making an artist making something that's technical but is also art, like a video game or whatever, and it captures how that is slowly eroded in the name of business and progress, and all of these sort of things. The episode of that is called "The Dark Quiet Death," and you can watch it all by itself. I think it's in the first season, maybe episode 4 or 5. It doesn't require any context from the rest of the series. It's with characters who do not exist in the rest of the series. It's just like this flashback, but it nails it completely. Sort of what happens when you have a big organization that slowly ruins something.
I've watched Silicon Valley, and I feel like that kind of has some similar vibes like that at parts of the show as well.
That show is very funny, Silicon Valley, and not that far from the truth. Despite its absurdities. Yeah.
So you just mentioned if someone's like an artist making something, and I assume you're talking about software. How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself more as a software engineer or an artist or a musician or a hacker or like something else?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely an artistry to developing software, and it's not all that. There is a lot of technical things that are challenges to solve, but I do feel like there is. I've come to sort of have a new theory about art and what sort of makes art significant, and that is the thing that we care about art is that a human made it. Because if a human didn't make it, it's really not interesting. It might be impressive, but the thing about art is that when a human makes art, there's this third law of Newtonian physics where every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And if you make something, the act of making that changes your brain. Your neural connections are forever altered by that. And so you can quantify the meaningfulness of the thing you made by how much it affected the artists themselves. And I think that's an interesting way of framing what is art, because if it's something that affected somebody emotionally, or they were really excited about it, or they were really cathartic about it, then these are all things that I think translate into the thing that is inevitably art. So in that respect, I think a lot of developing software is art. A lot of it isn't. A lot of it is if you're just optimizing something, maybe there's a certain appeal to it, but maybe it's not. It's more debatable, I guess. But yeah. So that's my general theory, is that there's some art in there. So at the end of the day, am I an artist in some level? Yeah. Well, also I like playing music, and that's an art too, and a lot of other media. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting that you think, or that one of the ways that you look at art is of the difference that it makes to the artist who makes it. But what about in cases where, and this is a lot of cases, where somebody is ingesting art that somebody has made over the other side of the world through like a phone, and they never really have any direct connection with that artist, and so therefore the difference that will have been made to that artist's brain will have no effect on that other person on the other side of the world. So it's only their perception of like what they get from it.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, what about in those cases?
I think it's that you look at the image and you don't know the artist, but you know that if you can feel and you can understand that it did affect the artist, and that's what's important. It's
like an intangible sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the backstory of it that does matter. You could use an LLM to generate something, and at that point you don't know, but you might know. And it's hard to say. There's a David Byrne had this an album and then this Broadway show, which was American Utopia. I think it's on HBO or something too, which I thought it was very good. But at one point he goes into this thing that the most interesting thing that humans can look at is other humans, which is kind of true. Like we like looking at other humans. We look at, you know, attractive people. We look at people playing sports. We look at people playing music. We look at people doing all these different things. And it's one of the things that, you know, we just naturally do. And I think art is sort of an extension of that, where you look at the thing that affected other people and the thing that other people were changed by making. And I think it's still like intuitively this or subconsciously this meaning that we find in it.
Mm. And do you think that would be impossible to get to through computer generated art or like AI stuff?
Personally, I don't know if it's impossible, and it's subjective, so who can say? But I can say that I think everything that I've seen that is computer generated leaves me a little bit empty inside.
Yeah, I kind of agree, actually. I also use this example a lot of like we have Stockfish. I don't know if you know about Stockfish. It's like the best chess engine that we have, and the best grandmasters use it to analyze their games to learn from, and they can't beat it. Like even Magnus Carlsen could play Stockfish 100 times in a row and he'd lose 100 to 0. Yet for some reason we still hold chess tournaments and we still want to watch people play chess against each other, even though we have this engine that we could just pair up against itself and watch essentially perfectly played games of chess happen over and over again. But for some reason it's not as exciting.
Yeah, that's that's exactly the same, I think. Can anyone ever beat the chess engine, or is it just like they lose 99% of the time?
They lose 100% of the time. It's like, so it's ELO. ELO is like the rating that they use in chess. It's like rated, like everyone gets a number, and that number is like how good that person is at chess. The best chess player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, is rated like 2,800, and Stockfish is rated like 3,600. And the ELO going up is exponential. Like it's, if somebody is like 2,600 and they're playing at 2,800, almost the 2,600 rated player will lose 100% of the time, almost the 2,800 player. It's like this exponential curve of like, to get to that high of an elo is just insane. Like it's not just like 2 times as good. It's like so much better. Yeah, I would agree. I also think there's something to be said for seeing the type of excitement that one exudes when they're doing something as well. Like if they're making art and they're like, and they themselves are just really stoked on it, and you can tell. That is also fun to watch. And I think you can also tell when somebody's doing something and just going through the motions and they're not extremely excited about the thing that they're doing as well. I do think there is some intangible thing there as well, which like we can clue into without fully pinpointing.
Yeah. Though having said that, I mean, like, you know, if someone develops skills and a style their whole life, and then they can just, you know, bang out a quick drawing that's iconically them, there is something still interesting about that because of all of the time and effort that they've spent. And I think that shows too, like, you know, the quick Picasso drawings, for example, are, you know, there's still something where it's like, oh, you're seeing that person, you know, because it's so much intertwined with their identity.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to talk about Reaper a little. I feel like, do you work on Reaper every day? Is this like your full-time thing at this point, or is it something you work on sometimes? Or
Yeah, pretty much every day. I mean, you know, some days I don't, but the overwhelming majority of, yeah, I do.
Do you have a team, or is it just you?
As far as programmers go, there are 2 of us at this point. Schwa, or John Schwartz, he's been working on it with me since almost the beginning. I mean, it was a few years in, but at this point, you know, it's more than a decade ago, 15 years ago, kind of thing. So
That's so wild to me that you can build Reaper with two people. I mean, I guess back in the day, people made operating systems with just one person. Like, I think I watched something the other day where someone made like a Unix or Linux or something in a week by themselves or something like that. Um, it's just wild to me when I look at I've dabbled in programming a tiny bit, and when I look at a big project like Reaper or something, I'm like, how does anyone have the time? This is insane. Like how deep this program goes.
I mean, the nice thing is that we both have been working on it for a really long time, and we've optimized the environment so that we can do things efficiently. And that's always, I think, from the beginning, that's been a goal, is to just try to make our jobs as easy as possible. We have a infrastructure in place and tools in place so that we can very easily make updates and get them out to our pre-release testers. And we also sort of invite everybody to try out pre-release builds. We don't have to manage a beta test group or anything like that and deal with any of the logistics of that. It's all about just making things as streamlined as possible for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I assume you've made your own framework for it and everything, so you've got like your own streamlined systems there as well.
Yeah, I mean, we try to keep our external dependencies to a minimum. I feel like that's a big problem with software these days, is that people make things that have just so many dependencies that are constantly being updated with fixes and security fixes, but also just like being improved, because that's like, if you're making a software package, you're always going to be wanting to improve it. And so sort of, if we had a bunch of external dependencies, we'd be constantly having to sort of evaluate those and adapt to those. So we try to keep that to a minimum. As a side note, like I ran a Mastodon server for maybe a year, and every so often there'd be like, oh, there's a critical bug fix security thing you have to upgrade for, and then you do that, and it pulls in like 1,000 new packages to install, and you're like, well, this supply chain just scares me. I have no idea what's coming in there. I can't possibly look at all of it to make sure it's reasonable. And so at a certain point, I was just like, this isn't worth running this. It's just like a full-time job just to try to keep up with this.
Yeah, I feel that way every time I go on GitHub and find some like Python thing, and I'll download the Python thing and install it, and then in the command line you just see like so much shit being downloaded. It's insane.
Yeah, it's I don't approve of that. So yeah, we try to keep things as streamlined in that way as possible too, and then we have our own library of code that we use. We try to open source a lot of it, the stuff that we think would be useful for other people, or especially for people making Reaper plugins and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So can you say which dependencies you are reliant on? Like, for example, I know you've got like pitch stretching algorithms and stuff. Are you using the Z-plane stuff for that, or would you make your own stuff for that?
Well, we support a lot of things in that department. We use Z-planes Elastique, which is everyone considers to be the best for general purpose use. Then we also use like Rubber Band Library, which is open source, and you can buy a license if you're using it in non-GPL software. And then also we have our own. We have a few that, like, there's one that does like a polyphase synthesis that you can do like really extreme, it's a similar algorithm to Paul stretch. So you can do like, if you want to stretch something by 1,000 to 1, which produces very pleasant results in that environment. You can also use it for fun effects of like just making this very smeared sound, because it uses FFTs, and you can tweak that. And then like some ones that emulate some classic samplers, time stretch, that sort of thing. The real dependencies that we use, though, are like things like zlib, which is like a data compression library. So if you want to use PNG files or zip files, zlib is the thing you use. libpng, which is also used for PNGs. the JPEG library, things like that. Those are the kind of external dependencies that we use, and those rarely need to update. We occasionally do, but.
So Reaper's pricing model and development philosophy seems pretty different, I would say, from the rest of the DAW market. What is the core value system behind that? Like, why is it $60? It's like it's a program that does more than like any of these other programs combined, it seems like, and it's $60 instead of like thousands of dollars.
Well, I forget who it was who was saying this. Paul Davis, who I saw recently, and he's the guy who started Ardor, or Ardor, which is, I can never say that word, which is the open source DAW. He was saying, now someone was saying, I don't remember who it was, but every DAW person using a DAW uses about 30 features or something like that. The problem is that everybody has their different 30 features, so. You could charge a lot more for Reaper based on that logic that it's got so many features. But most people using it is like if I'm going to go record my guitar riffs and stuff like that, like why should I spend a few $100s for that? It doesn't make much sense. Also, we get a lot of users are in other countries where $60 is a lot of money. So that people complain about that being too expensive, and it's like, well, it would be nice to be able to offer lower prices in other countries and things like that, but logistically and that's not easy to do. The original goal of our pricing was that we would have a price for people who are just doing small things or doing things that are not making tons of money. And then have a separate price for the big organizations, the big corporations that are, that they're probably using more of the features, but also they have the budgets. They're going to write it off against their taxes, and have a different price for them, and which would give us two things. One is give us a little more money, but also give us a more credibility in terms of like what is the actual value of this thing, and if you make it too cheap or free, then people think, oh, it's worthless. But if you're like, oh, this is how much it costs, but we'll give you a break if you're not making a ton of money, then people will still associate the value with the higher value. That was the theory 20 years ago when we started doing this, or 19 years ago. But it seems to be pretty good. The real thing is that we don't want to ever have to enforce it technologically. We don't want to be there, making sure everybody's following the rules, because that's not the job we want to be doing. We want to just be making software and having a good time. And we don't want to be compromising the software so that to make sure that people are abiding by the license agreement, because that's a losing battle ultimately.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to call it a sanity tax, I guess. It's something that you do so you don't go insane, even if it costs you maybe some money.
What's the sanity tax? Like accepting some amount of piracy, you mean, or?
Yeah, like so in my example, the sanity tax would be not worrying about like enforcing all of these rules and accepting that some people aren't going to follow those rules, but at the benefit of keeping a lot of your sanity.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Why did you go with the name Cocos, or is it Cook? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Cocos, yeah.
Okay.
It was a joke that there's a quote from Office Space where which is a great movie, by the way, in case your listeners have not watched it. There's a quote where I don't need to give the full context, but basically one of the characters, Michael Bolton, yells, "Those cocos," except it may or may not be that word, but he's talking about the corporate, their corporate bosses who are planning to fire him. Spoiler alert. And so at some point when I was working at AOL, someone basically called the corporate bosses cocos. I think it was in regards to their actions when, I did something stupid like releasing Nutella or a waste or something like that, and basically there was some sort of disparaging remark made about our corporate bosses, calling them cacos. And so it seemed like a funny thing to name that we would be the Cacos Incorporated, But, in hindsight, terrible name. Would not use it again. But at this point, too much trouble to change it. So,
If you could start again, what would you call the company?
I don't know. Yeah.
True. Would you say, in that sense, like Reaper was basically a reaction to your previous corporate experiences, or like at least the way the company is structured and stuff like that?
Going back to actually, what would I call it? I would have, in hindsight, bought back the name Nullsoft from AOL when I had the opportunity and used that name. But that's another conversation, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think running. I don't know if it was a response to. I think the structure of Cacos and how we do Reaper is similar to, I think, how Winamp, my initial goals with Winamp were, which sort of felt intuitively like a good compromise as far as making things, asking people to pay, making them obligated to pay, that sort of thing, and keeping the overhead of the company low so that we didn't have to, we don't spend a lot of money, and that's, I think, allows us to not really worry about, we don't advertise and we don't sell advertisements, we don't sell customer data, we just focus on the thing that we like doing, and so we have a lot of freedom in that respect. And so, yeah, I think, I don't know if AOL really affected that, but it definitely was an example of things not to do. There were times at AOL, like once we sold Winamp there, where you had people whose job it was to go like make deals, and so they would go do that. And then, as a product person making software, they would be like, oh, we want to integrate this and this and this and that. And, they would be for reasons purely because they have a deal. And that's not a good thing. And it also ended up being, not sustainable, where they had deals where they had to pay money. And so then they had to figure out how to pay for things like that. And it's just a total mess. And it corrupted the process of making something nice. And instead, you made something that was designed to have multiple goals of making money and, fulfilling contractual obligations and that sort of thing. And so that's definitely something we do not do.
Yeah, whilst I was researching for this podcast, I found the Nullsoft manifesto, which said things like, we're never going to do anything evil, we just want to write cool software, and made fun of bloated and over-engineered programs whilst emphasizing simplicity, speed, and user empowerment, and also kind of poked fun at some corporations, but at the same time you were owned by AOL. Did that cause some like internal conflict for you, having written that manifesto but then being owned by a big corporation?
Actually don't remember that manifesto, so that sounds nice. No, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think there were always conflicts in terms of having to do things that I didn't want to have to do, or having things that we made compromised by the needs of the parent company. But those are fights that were fought and so on. But at this point, I really don't remember very much of it.
True. Was the openness of Reaper, like the ability to do scripting and whatnot in there, was that part of the plan from the start, or is that something that evolved organically over time?
That definitely evolved organically. I mean, initially it was just like, hey, let me make something for recording, and then everything else evolved from there. There was very little plan. It was, it's all been about seeing what happens and seeing what people ask for and seeing what I find myself wanting to do and so on.
Yeah, one thing I noticed once whilst using Reaper is I noticed there was a bunch of like JS type script things in there, and I was like, oh, it's JavaScript probably. And then I looked into it and realized there was its own proprietary scripting called Jesus Sonic. Um, can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah. So before I started Reaper, I made a programmable effects processor that was the initial thing was like, what if you had a guitar pedal that you could go and type on and like write scripts that do processing and so on. So I did that, and it was called Jesus Sonic because it was just what would Jesus use, and then eventually, that evolved a little bit, and I actually at one point had it so you could have these effects processing, and then you could have multiple layers of them, and so you could have, and then you could put a drum machine on one of the layers and do all sorts of things like that if you wanted. And then that was sort of like an interesting thing in your mind where you're like, oh well, this is starting to become sort of a DAW. Um, and so eventually, when I did start Reaper, which then we added initially, I think we just added DirectX plugin support because we were only on Windows, and that's what Vegas supported. So it was like, oh, we can use the Vegas plugins, and then I was like, oh well, I can bring that the Jesus-Sonic effect processor into Reaper and use that in that context too. And then initially, you could just load up like an entire instance of the Jesus-Sonic program on a track, and then eventually, and that in it you could have multiple layers and multiple plugins in a chain and do all sorts of things between them. But it kind of became clear that each of these instances of a Jesus-Sonic effect sort of would map very well to the equivalent of a VST or a DirectX plugin. And so then it got shortened. So instead of the Jesus Sonic effect list, you would just have a JS plugin, which is the Jesus Sonic effect. Yeah.
Nice.
So it just sort of evolved its way into there. And then since then, it's been extended and improved a ton as happens over 20 years.
Right. Is there a feature in Reaper that you're most proud of, or one that was the hardest to get right?
I think, well, hardest to get right. I don't know. I mean, there's a million things that are impossible to get right, but I think the thing that I still like appreciate is that it's just the nature of it, that you can run it and you don't have to make any decisions until you actually need to. So, when you launch it, you're just presented with an empty project. You can just create a track, arm the track, start recording. You don't have to think about, oh, well, what sample rate am I using? Or, where is this media going to go? Or anything like that. You basically just get to go, and you can start wherever your creativity takes you. Similarly, you could start recording, a vocal part and be like, oh, I need to turn my guitar track on. You could just, while you're recording, you can create a track, set your guitar up and that sort of thing. Just the sort of dynamic nature of it, that it doesn't really get in your way. And that's something that I very much appreciate, especially when I use other DAWs for testing things, that there's always a lot more fuss involved for me. And but I'm biased, and I'm sure there are downsides too. Like, if you record something, where does the media go? Well, people get bit by that, and they have to, when you save it, you can optionally have it copy the media to the new place or move it. But it's not necessarily all perfect that way, but it is something that sort of fits my workflow well, and so I'm always happy about that.
What are your thoughts on the current state of music software? Do you think that there's anything missing or underexplored?
I don't know. I mean, if I did, then I would probably be doing that. I mean, yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. People ask about, all of the things that AI will do for everything, and that is something that I kind of don't care about. I mean, there are things where you're like, oh, that's really cool, like the ability to produce stems from recorded material. It's really cool, but also like, is that actually something I would care about? Like, um, you know, I don't know. Um,
It's funny, all of the programmers I've had on recently, like you, Steve Duda, Dave Gamble, I think, like, yeah, a bunch of these people who are like clearly at the top of their game for music production. Whenever I bring up AI, they're just like, I just don't care. Whereas like everyone on the planet at the moment seems to be losing their mind over AI and
yeah.
starting to get like concerned about AGI and all of this stuff. But it seems like all of the incredibly smart programmers are just like, meh. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, there is an appeal, obviously. I mean, if we do get to an actual AGI, artificial general intelligence or whatever, that will be amazing. But I don't think it's anywhere close to happening. And maybe that's part of it, is that programmers know how far that is, or have a more intuitive sense of how far that is. We might all be wrong too. Who knows? But I just think back to, there's like a clip of one of the founders of I forget the name of the startup that does music generation.
Suno or Udio?
I think it was probably Suno. Yeah, there's a clip of the guy sort of saying, making music is really hard, and no one wants to spend the time doing that.
Yeah, I know the clip you're talking about.
And so we just made it easy, and it's like, yeah, but it's hard. But that's why people do it. It's because it's fun. It's challenging. They're a part of the process. Learning to play an instrument is hard and challenging, but it changes you, and that's why people do it. I guess I just feel like these things are cool and people will play with them, but will they actually care? And I don't think they will.
Yeah, maybe seems like an extension to sort of the effect that Spotify maybe had on the music industry, where it kind of devalued music a ton. And then it seems like maybe this next step will devalue it even more, to the point where artists are making stuff and 99% of people on the planet are just like, man, whatever, Suno music is good enough. But maybe the only people who will appreciate the human-made music is like other producers or something.
Well, I hope not. I mean, I don't know. All the stuff I hear is always just feels, again, it leaves, there's an emptiness there. And maybe it's because I know it, but maybe it's not. I don't know.
Well, it's almost like I feel like part of the reason we like watching sports, like let's say NFL, for example, is because we've all tried to run in our life and we know how hard it is, and we've all tried to maybe catch a ball in our life and we know how hard that is, etc. Whereas producing music, not everyone has done that. A lot of people, most people have not done that, and so they don't know how hard it is to produce really good music, and so maybe it's harder to empathize with the difficulty of it. And maybe part of it is that knowing the difficulty of it and being in awe of this person that's like managing the difficulties of it perfectly is part of what makes something, or another human doing something, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the argument for live music, and that's why live music will survive, is because um, you won't want to go watch someone play some AI generated song, but going to watch people on a stage playing instruments, that will, you won't be able to replicate that.
Right. Or maybe with
There's hope
Boston
there.
Dynamics robots. We'll see. What's a recent idea or technology that completely blew your mind?
What's any idea that's completely blown my mind? I don't know. Hmm. Yeah, can't remember anything.
Or how about this one? Have you ever built a tool for yourself that you've never released to the public, and why?
Um, like software tools more than I can count.
And what is the reason that they don't get released?
I mean, I actually generally do try to, like, to the extent possible, I've started trying to put things just on random GitHub repositories so that in case someone finds them useful. But usually because it's like the use is so specific to whatever it is I'm trying to do that, it might not be that valuable, or it might be too impossible for someone to go and tweak to meet their meet their needs. I'll count some of the ones I recently pushed to GitHub because, they're things that I sort of made and then sat on for like 5 or 10 years. But, like I made an iOS app that that lets you upload text and images to a generic web server, right? The idea being if I want to update, post images to my blog or whatnot, I could do it from my phone. And then I write some PHP that exists on the back end that then takes the HTTP post thing and then, writes the appropriate files and so on. That I wouldn't release because just to deal with Apple and their App Store and guidelines and that whole process is just like, it's not worth it to me when I just want to use it for myself. So that, I push that to GitHub. So if someone else wants to build it, install it, they probably have to get like a signing certificate or whatever from Apple, which is so annoying. But so, things like that, though, then I only use it every, 6 months or something like that. And usually when I do, I'm like, oh, I have to go build it again because my phone's updated and now it doesn't work anymore. So there's things like that. Going back to IRC, before we started using Slack for work, we used an IRC server for communication, so I've actually made a proxy for IRC that would let you, basically would emulate Discord in a lot of ways, in that you could connect and it would bring you up to date with everything you missed while you were disconnected. So if you had an IRC client on your phone, you could like periodically check in and see everything that you missed and that sort of thing. And that was called HoboProx. So it's like a hobo. So if you're on the move a lot, then you could access it. But and I think I made a web interface for it too, so you didn't necessarily need an IRC client. And that I actually pushed to GitHub recently, even though it'd been sitting in our Git repository for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years without having been touched. And then there's like a million scripts that you write that just do some particular thing that you keep around, and there's all sorts of things like that, which technically would be programs. There's probably other things too, but it's a lot of work to take something from useful for me to being useful for the general public. So that's probably why things get sort of sat on.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you do if you couldn't code anymore?
Well, I would probably just devote my my life to actually becoming good at playing guitar. I think that would be, and running, and I would continue to run guitar, and maybe start a podcast or something.
There you go. Yeah. What if you started a podcast? What kind of things do you think you would cover?
I think, it would probably be just talking about, shooting the shit and talking about, what life things, all the different ways you can sort of quantify things that we feel, I guess. I learned something recently that made a lot of sense. And it wasn't even like a bit of new knowledge, but it was like an observation that really affected me, which is, I already knew this, which is that there are, there are introverts and extroverts, right? And introverts are people who, spend energy when they're talking. to people, and extroverts who are people who gain energy from talking to other people and stuff like that, right? I'm more on the introverted side, maybe somewhere in the middle. But then there's also another important attribute, which is social skills, right? And there are people who have good social skills. They know how to listen, how to read other people, and then there are people who don't, and there are people in between, obviously, and I'm probably somewhere in the middle too. And when you have certain combinations of these two parameters, it can be a lot to deal with. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely on the introverted side, but I feel like I don't necessarily spend energy when I'm talking to one person like we're doing now, but I definitely do spend energy when I'm in a social situation with multiple people and having to. I find if I do one conversation that goes somewhat deep and has some value to it, I feel good about that. But if it's like 10 people and it's all just small talk and like hellos and how are you and when did you get to the event and like just stupid small shit like that costs me a lot of energy for some reason.
Yeah,
And
no, I'm with
maybe,
you. One-on-one, it depends on the person you're talking to too.
Also true, yeah.
I've actually found, I had a previous theory, which I'm not sure how it relates to this one, which was there's like a curve of, like a Gaussian curve of, how much on the x-axis is how much the person wants to talk to me, and on the y-axis is how draining it is. So if or how much I ultimately don't want to talk to them, or want to talk to them. So it's like, if someone really doesn't want to talk to you, then you definitely don't want to talk to them, right? And if someone really, really wants to talk to you, you also don't want to talk to them. But if they're kind of cool talking to you, then it's okay, But you don't want those. Either extreme is really difficult.
Yeah, I would agree with that actually. Cool. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. This is really interesting, and I appreciate your time, and obviously keep up the good work with Reaper. It's an amazing tool. I use it often for batch utility type stuff. And yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Anytime. Happy to talk to you. It was actually, I would say, not draining at all. So that's good.
Amazing.
Maybe I'm more extroverted than I thought. That could be.